we'll be covering in this session. So again, we'll start with a meditation, the same meditation as we did before lunch, the mindfulness of breathing, focusing on the area of the abdomen. And then a short review of some of the main points from this morning. And then we'll have a look at what's we mentioned earlier this morning, this idea of prerequisites, how to sort of set up our life in such a way to support this practice. And then we'll go to the third and last method we'll use today, that is mindfulness of breathing, focusing at the entrance of the nostrils. And then after that meditation, have a brief look at this stages of progress in Shamatha. How do we know if we're progressing and how far we've gone? We'll use that colored diagram that we saw earlier on one of the slides, that windy road to Shamatha. So we'll have a brief look at those 9 stages also later in the session. But first, we'll begin with the meditation, mindfulness of breathing, focusing in the area of the abdomen. And so again, here, keeping that basis of relaxation, and here, improving stability of attention by focusing down on a larger area of the abdomen. And in the last session, we introduced the idea of counting the breath as a way to help stabilize attention. Some of you may have found that helpful. Some of you maybe didn't find it helpful. So again, in this session, if you find yourself getting distracted a lot and you find the counting the breath helpful, you can bring that in, otherwise just leave it out. So let's do that practice again now. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. The breathing flowing naturally and effortlessly. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. And then whilst maintaining that basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, bring your attention to the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Simply noticing the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. And maintaining that ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And to help balance the mind, to help overcome any agitation, tension, or distraction, we can use the out breath as an opportunity to relax and release any tightness or tension, and to release any thoughts that arise in the mind. And to help overcome dullness or laxity or drowsiness, we can use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh our focus, to sharpen our focus on the breath. And so relaxing and releasing on the out-breath and sharpening the focus on the in-breath. And if you're finding that you're constantly becoming distracted, and if you find it helpful, you might like to introduce some counting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. And we can bring the meditation to a close. And so this practice again that we're doing today is this Shamatha practice, the practice of cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind. And Shamatha is actually the level of concentration that we are striving to attain, but the practice itself is just called Shamatha practice as well. And we saw there are many benefits for doing the Shamatha practice, many daily life benefits, but also here in the context of spiritual practice, it's really the foundation of all other practices. Without really engaging in the Shamatha practice, then whatever other practice we're doing, I think is not going to be very effective because we'll be constantly distracted and dull and so forth, not focused. We won't be able to really penetrate any other practice. And then how to train in Shamatha practice. We saw here that, and we're going to look at that topic now, prerequisites, how to set up our life in such a way to support this practice. Because now in the modern world, particularly this idea of mindfulness is very popular, even somewhat trendy. But unfortunately, it's often presented like sort of a band-aid to sort of fix all of our problems in the world without really any framework around it, just bare mindfulness. And they often present this almost like a magic pill. Here, do a little bit of mindfulness and all your problems will go away. They won't go away. In fact, they may get worse. Because if we want mindfulness to be effective, we need a framework. And so here we're having this framework, not only of Shamatha practice, but also these prerequisites as a framework. And also when we study more about Buddhism, we see the framework of also Vipassana practice, of loving kindness practice, ethical basis. All of this is framework, very important. And then in terms of the actual practice here, we looked at how to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of any meditation session, preparing body, speech, mind. And then here in terms of the actual Shamatha meditation, we looked at what qualities to cultivate: relaxation, stability, clarity, objective focus. Again, for most of us, at least initially, breath is probably going to be the best object to focus on. The two tools of mindfulness and introspection. Mindfulness to hold the object. Introspection is quality control, monitoring that. And then the faults and how to overcome them. The two main faults, two main imbalances there: laxity and excitation, or dullness and distraction. And we looked at how to overcome those in the earlier session. And in the next session, we'll also then look at how we can bring this Shamatha practice into daily life, how to integrate it into daily life. And in those faults as well, one thing I want to mention again is this laziness. And as Tsongkhapa said, if we don't really appreciate the benefits of this practice and we really feel like the source of my happiness is coming from out there, I suggest we're going to be very lazy when it comes to doing this practice, because we won't have time. We're too busy sort of accumulating stuff, wealth, pleasure, and so forth. So we really need to shift that focus, really see and understand that the real source of genuine happiness, of inner well-being, is coming from within our mind, not from anywhere out there. And that this Shamatha practice is really the key that opens the door to that goal of genuine happiness, inner well-being. Then we'll have a lot of enthusiasm to do this practice. So now I'd like to look at these so-called prerequisites. And again, I'd like to do that by first reading a little bit from Alan Wallace's Attention Revolution. He also talks about these. So let's have a look at what he says. He says, when I lead Shamatha seminars, I like to think of them as expeditions rather than retreats. The word retreat has the connotation not only of withdrawal, but also of defeat. And that certainly isn't the spirit of such practice. The word expedition, on the other hand, suggests adventure, conquest, and exploration. The Latin roots of the word have to do with extricating yourself, literally stepping out of some situation in which you've gotten stuck. In the practice of Shamatha, we discover how deeply our minds are trapped in the twin ruts of excitation and laxity, or in other words, how much we're caught up in dullness and distraction. In the Buddhist tradition, a mind trapped in these ruts is said to be dysfunctional, and in order to make it serviceable, it is helpful to step out of our normal activities, seek out a spacious sense of solitude, and explore the frontiers of the mind. This expedition doesn't require blind faith or allegiance to any religious creed or metaphysical belief system. Over the past 3 millennia, contemplatives from various Asian cultures with diverse belief systems have followed the path of Shamatha to its culmination, and they have reported their findings. We don't need to accept their claims simply on their own authority, but if we are inspired by earlier accounts of the benefits of this practice, we may venture forth on this path to see for ourselves whether we can achieve the results of the contemplative explorers who have preceded us. There are great adventures ahead, but also perils and dead ends. Sometimes the path is clear, but now and then it may seem to disappear altogether. The purpose of relying on those who know this path from their own experience is to save time. 6 prerequisites for sustained, rigorous training are set forth in many Indian and Tibetan Buddhist meditation manuals. These are some of the essential causes and conditions that will produce the fruit of shamatha. So these 6 prerequisites that we're about to look at are presented in the shamatha meditation manuals in the context of someone who wishes to really go off and do a little bit longer retreat on shamatha, how to set up their life in such a way to support that sort of retreat setting. But I think you'll see that even though we may not have a plan to do that, if we take notice of these 6 prerequisites, they can be very helpful for us in a normal sort of life, how to really set up our life in such a way to support a much more meaningful life in terms of a contemplative lifestyle. So let's have a look at these 6 prerequisites and see what they are. The first is so-called outer condition, the supportive environment. And here Tsongkhapa says, and again, this is a description of what the outer conditions should look like if we're doing a sort of a retreat setting, but we'll comment on a couple of these that you'll find very helpful even in a normal lifestyle. And he says the area should have 5 attributes. 1, easy access, so that necessities such as food and clothing are readily obtained. So if we're in a retreat setting, we need easy access to food and so forth, and water. 2nd, being a good place to live, where there are no wild beasts, no enemies, and so forth. Self-explanatory. The 3rd one, being a good piece of ground in that it does not breed sickness. So to be in a healthy environment, not one full of disease. The 4th one, very important, and I'm going to comment more about this, offering good companionship, insofar as your companions are ethically disciplined and like-minded. And the 5th one, being well situated, means insomuch as there's not so many people about in the day and little noise at night. So if we want to engage in some sort of meditation practice at home, quiet environment would be very helpful, the 5th point. But also very important, the 4th point, good companionship. Here in Buddhism, we often see this word sangha, spiritual community. If we really want to start to move our life in a better direction, then we need help. Because now we tend to have very strong habits and a lot of influences around us that is often driving us in the opposite direction that we're wanting to go. And so if we have this attitude or idea that, well, you know, I can do this by myself, you know, I think you're going to find it extremely difficult, if not impossible. This was my experience and experience of many people I talked to. When I first encountered Buddhism, full of enthusiasm, wanted to really change my life, head in a new, better direction. But where I went back to, and I did my training a little bit in Kopan Monastery, a couple of courses. And I went home and I really wanted to meditate each day and really start to move my life in a better direction, more meaningful direction. But basically for 2 years, nothing happened. Nothing happened because I just got swept up in my old habits. I wasn't strong enough to work against that. So if you really want to start to move in a better direction in your life, I think you need help as a beginner. So find these like-minded people that is mentioned here. It could be a Buddhist center such as this, but it could just be a group of friends who have similar aspirations in their life. Get together, meet together regularly, support each other. Then we have a little bit of help to start to move against the tide, because it's a little bit like trying to swim upstream in a river, because everything's driving us in the opposite direction. So we need some help. So this is something I can't, again, overemphasize enough, that if we really want to move in a better direction in life, find these people, get connected, help support each other. So that's part of the supportive environment. The next two come together, and they are having few desires and being content. And this is with respect to material possessions and wealth. And having few desires is about things that we don't have. And being content is with respect to what we do have. And so here, Alan Wallace, he says, without these two qualities, your mind will never settle down in the practice. You'll be constantly thinking of things you want, but you don't have, and you will fret that your present circumstances are inadequate in one way or another. This does not mean that you must quell your desire for happiness, but it is necessary to refocus your aspirations on transforming your own mind as a means to genuine well-being. Mental balance is the gateway to finding genuine happiness, and shamatha is the key that opens that gate. So again, and this goes back to this idea of laziness when it comes to meditating. You know, if we're really focusing out there and we really think, well, I need to get more money, I need to get more things, more pleasure, I need more, then we're going to be lazy when we meditate. And even if we do meditate, our minds will be caught up in these distractions, trying to get more things, thinking about all the things we really think we need. So if we turn our mind inwards and we really understand, as Alan Wallace says here, that transforming our mind is really the gateway to genuine happiness, inner well-being, and that this shamatha practice is the key that opens the gate to that, then we will lose a lot of that craving and attachment. We'll be much more content with what we have, adequate physical things. And then we can really devote time and energy to meditation and to developing ourselves, developing our mind. Then the fourth one is few activities. And this is really to simplify our life. You know, I often hear people say, oh, I'd really like to meditate, but I simply don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to meditate. Well, I don't think that's never really a valid excuse. It is true, however, that most of us in the modern world have very busy lives. And some activities we do each day are necessary. Most of us need to work at some level to have enough food, to have a roof over our head, food in our stomach. Some of us have family responsibilities. Some of us have some other essential responsibilities. But above and beyond those essential responsibilities, we tend to fill up our day with lots of stuff. Why? Usually one of two reasons. One is that in our modern society, it's felt like if you're not doing something, you're not being productive. So just do something, do anything, do something. And if we're not doing anything and we're just sitting quietly, that really forces us to sort of look at the state of our mind, which is a bit of a mess. And so we don't like what we see, so we just busy ourselves to distract ourselves so we don't have to look at our sort of neurotic mind. And this is exactly what Alan Wallace again says here in his book. He says, given the fast pace of modern life and the general emphasis on keeping busy, it can be difficult to make this shift to simplicity. Our work can be a kind of narcotic, concealing the unrest and turbulence of our minds. And a lifestyle that alternates between hard work and hard play can keep us constantly busy without ever gaining a clue about the meaning of life or the potentials of human consciousness. So if we want to simplify our life, we could just forcibly cut things out of our life. But I think you'll find that won't work. Rather, what we can do more effectively is these two reflections mentioned here on the slide. Reflect on precious human life, that we have this human life full of opportunities to make our life meaningful. And reflecting on death as well, to understand this wonderful opportunity to make our life meaningful is not going to last forever. Because if we do this, then I think what you're going to find is that all of these things that you fill up your day with that don't really bring you anything, you're simply going to lose interest in it because you'll see that they're meaningless and you don't want to waste your life. We don't want to be one of these people later in our life, looking back on our life, full of regrets at having wasted this wonderful opportunity that we have. And on that point, I'd like to read a short few paragraphs from a talk that Steve Jobs gave back in 2005 to students at Stanford University. And I think you all know who Steve Jobs was. And Steve Jobs says, addressing the students at Stanford, he said, "When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, 'If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right.' It made an impression on me. And since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations or pride or fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart." So I think some very good advice there from Steve Jobs. And then the fifth of the 6 prerequisites is ethical discipline. And I think this is not only the basis, of course, of all Buddhist traditions, but I think it's the basis of any meaningful lifestyle, is really ethics, avoiding harming others. But here in his book, Alan Wallace not only talks about social ethics, again, avoiding harm of others, he also talks about the importance of environmental ethics, looking after the environment, and psychophysical ethics, looking after our body and mind as well. So again, I think that's fairly obvious that if we really want a more meaningful life, ethics is really the basis of that. And then the last point is letting go of compulsive thinking. And here Alan Wallace says, many of us let compulsive thoughts dominate our minds. These won't stop overnight, but as we engage in shamatha practice, both during and between sessions, it is important to observe the mind's activities and restrain it when it falls into thought patterns that aggravate mental disturbances. But also here, I mean, most of us, I think, again, in the modern world, we have some obsessive compulsive thinking about certain things. And a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking is related to this worldview that the source of my happiness is out there, the source of my suffering is out there. So a lot of our obsessive compulsive thinking is thinking about how can I get those things there that really seem to make me happy? We obsess about that. And then we obsess about how can I avoid those things out there that seem to be causing me so much suffering? So again, I think one way to help to let go a lot of this obsessive compulsive thinking is really reflect on the fact source of happiness and suffering is nowhere out there. It lies within our own mind. And then I think a lot of that obsessive compulsive thinking we can start to let go. And then finally here, Tsongkhapa, he also talks about these 6 prerequisites in his shamatha part of his Lam Rim. And he says, the most important ones are good ethical discipline. So again, ethics is the foundation of all meaningful lives, I think. Seeing desires as disadvantageous. Again, seeing that having craving and attachment for sensory pleasures out there is not going to bring us happiness. It's just going to bring us a lot of unnecessary suffering. And to understand the source of happiness is within. And then dwelling in an appropriate area, particularly here again, the idea of Sangha. So I think these three things, if we can simply adopt these in our daily life, already a big step in the right direction, is really make sure we've got very good ethical basis for our life, avoiding harming of anyone, and then really to stop chasing after sensory pleasures because they're never going to fulfill us, never satisfy us. Really understand the source of happiness is within, and then support people, Sangha. Find some like-minded people. If we can do these three things, I think we're already on a very good foundation, not only for Shamatha practice, but for even just moving in a more healthy, more meaningful way of life. So let's now go to the next and last practice we're going to do today, the mindfulness of breathing, focusing at the entrance of the nostrils. So what are we focusing on here? When it says focusing on the breath at the entrance of the nostrils, then you can focus either at the actual entrance of the nostrils or this little area above the upper lip. So anywhere in this area here, wherever you find most easiest, anywhere here. And this is particularly good for improving clarity of attention, because here we're moving the attention up and it's much smaller area of focus. So very helpful, as one of the questions we saw online in the last session, the person said that they found here was very good for clarity, and it is. But here lies the danger, is that because we're bringing the attention up and it's much smaller area of focus, a little bit more difficult to pick up the sensations, the natural tendency can be to tense, to tighten, like this. So we want to be mindful of this. So remember, keep that basis in relaxation. And then monitor, particularly the face area. Because often when we're doing the tightening, we get a lot of tension around the eyes, maybe tension in the jaw, tension in the back of the neck, a lot of sensations across the forehead. If you notice this tension, then relax, relax, relax. Keep releasing and relaxing. And also because it's much more difficult to focus here than in the abdomen, often people force the breath, breathe heavy to pick up sensation. So we don't want to do that either. So just breathing naturally, staying very quiet, very relaxed, and just attentively focus here without getting tense. And also in this practice, if you find yourself getting distracted a lot and you find it helpful, counting the breath, you can bring that in to stabilize attention. So that's the practice we're going to do now. Let's do that practice. Once again, we begin with establishing a good posture. Back straight. And allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. To come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. And again, whilst maintaining that basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, bring your attention to the sensations of the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. And simply notice the sensations at the entrance of the nostrils as the breath flows across this area. Keeping all the muscles in the face soft and relaxed. All the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally, not trying to force the breath in any way. And again, if you're finding that you're just constantly becoming distracted, you might like to experiment with some counting of the breath to help stabilize the attention. And if you notice any tension in the body, particularly in the area of the face, or any tension in the mind, then use the out breath to relax and release that tightness or tension. And if you can't release that tension, even if you're focused well on the breath and the nostrils, but if you can't release that tension, then don't stay at the nostrils. Move your attention down to the area of the abdomen and focus there to re-establish a basis in relaxation. And then once you find yourself more relaxed in the body and mind, then return to focusing at the nostrils. And we can bring the meditation to a close. I just want to briefly look at a few of these stages that we go through on the way to Shamatha, particularly the first couple of stages, because that's probably where most of us are now. And so you may find some practical advice for these early stages. So the classic presentation for the stages we go through to Shamatha is this 9-stage model here, from what's called directed attention up to attentional balance. And they're described on this windy path to Shamatha, which is the diagram in the middle at the top. Let's have a look at the first stage called directed attention. And this first road here is called the power of hearing, meaning the way in which we enter into this practice is we hear about the instructions about what to do. So either from a teacher or even reading it in a book. So we receive some instructions about Shamatha practice, and then we launch into the practice. And we saw here again, the meditator has they have their 2 tools, the rope of mindfulness in the left hand, the hook of introspection in the right hand. Again, the elephant is the mind. The black color is symbolizing laxity or dullness. The monkey is discursive thought in general. The black color is this excitation, the most common form of distraction. And so here we see that the elephant and monkey are running wildly ahead of the meditator. And at this first stage, stage 1, called directed attention, what we notice at the beginning of this practice is we simply notice that our mind is completely out of control. That, we sit down and we try to focus on the breath. And then after a couple of seconds, off we go on some story. And maybe we're on that story for minutes at a time. And then eventually, after some minutes, our quality control, our introspection says, hang on, you're supposed to be focusing on the breath. And then we reapply mindfulness to the breath for another 2 or 3 seconds, and then off we go again on our stories. And so when that happens, then often people say, well, I can't meditate. I just can't meditate. In fact, I must be doing something wrong, because my mind now seems to be much worse than before I started meditating. So I'm definitely doing something wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing it correctly. In fact, this is the very first sign of progress in this practice, is simply noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. Because until we sit down to focus on an object like the breath, we have this illusion that, my mind is sort of okay, focusing on the breath, well, that can't be too difficult. I might get a little bit distracted, a bit dull, but that shouldn't be too difficult, should it? And then when we sit down and we find that we're virtually hardly ever on the object, and most of the time we're gone somewhere, that's our experience. But actually, this is the first sign of progress, noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. And then often in a group situation as well, when people have this experience, then they sort of look around and everyone else is super still. I'm the only one who can't meditate. Everyone else is meditating well. I'm just hopeless. No, you're not. You can meditate. You're making progress. That is the first sign of progress in this practice. Good work. Keep it up. But then if we continue to practice this shamatha, we'll go around the bend in the road to the next road. And the next road is called the power of contemplation or reflection or thinking about the practice. So we go a little bit deeper into the practice by understanding the practice better, understanding the benefits of practice. We become a little bit more enthusiastic about the practice, put a little bit of more effort in, and we make some progress. And we get to stage 2 called continuous attention. And so what we notice here is that the elephant and monkey are not running so fast anymore, and they have a little white on the top of the head. This is stability and clarity. So now we have a little bit of stability and clarity in our meditation. We may notice there are times where our mind starts to settle down a bit. And now at this stage, we can probably focus on the breath for up to a minute or two before we're distracted, but still we're distracted for long periods of time. So even at stage 2, we tend to be more off the object than on the object. But then we keep practicing, and now our mindfulness starts to get better. And so we go around the bend in the road to the next road, which is the power of mindfulness. So at stage 3 and 4, now our mindfulness is getting a lot better. We can hold the object longer. So here at this third stage, which is called resurgent attention, we see the rope of mindfulness now tied to the elephant of the mind. And so now at this stage, we can focus on the object maybe up to 5 to 10 minutes at a time. And now when we're distracted, we quickly recognize that and we quickly come back to the breath, to the object. And that's symbolized by the elephant turning the head backwards. But now we have a rabbit has come into the picture on the back of the elephant. The rabbit is subtle laxity, subtle dullness. Here by stage 3, now we're focusing quite well on the object. And if we get distracted, we quickly come back. So we may think, well, I think I'm pretty close to Shamatha because I'm pretty well on the object nearly all the time. And if I get distracted, I'm back very fast. We've still got a lot of work to do on the quality of our attention. And one thing is our mind is still not very sharp and clear. And if we don't pick that up, we'll get stuck here. So now we have to start to pick up when the mind is sinking just a little bit. That's the rabbit. Stage 4 is called close attention. Now we can hold the object the entire session without ever completely losing it. But still, we got a lot of work to go on the quality of attention, because even at stage 4 here, we can have what's called this medium excitation, where we're focusing on the breath, but most of our attention is thinking about what we're going to do tonight, and just a little bit is on the breath. So that even can happen at stage 4. So then over these next couple of stages, stage 5 and 6, we are constantly fine-tuning our attention, noticing more and more subtle levels of agitation and dullness and correcting those. And here the analogy in the middling stages is the analogy of a guitar string. If a guitar string is too tight or too loose, it doesn't play well. If our mind is too tight or too loose, it doesn't focus well. So we're constantly fine-tuning our mind to focus. If we're a little bit loose, we're sinking, tighten. A little bit too tight, agitation, loosen. So we're constantly adjusting our focus, getting rid of more and more subtle levels of agitation and dullness over these middling stages here. Then we go around the bend to stage 7 and 8. This road is called the road of enthusiasm. Now our practice is full of enthusiasm, full of joy. That's what's driving us forward. And here at stage 7, we see that the meditators, the monkey, the rabbit's gone, saying goodbye to the monkey, just a little bit of black on the back of the elephant. So at stage 7, if we notice any little subtle agitation, subtle dullness, easily dispelled. And then at stage 8, monkey's gone, no black on the elephant. Now all we need to do is have a little bit of effort to start the meditation, and we can meditate flawlessly for a long period of time without any hint of subtle agitation, subtle dullness. And if we keep practicing, then we will go to stage 9. We see the meditator in a cave with the elephant, and it's called attentional balance. Now it's completely spontaneous. We can slip in and out of meditation effortlessly, effortless meditation for a long period of time. But still we haven't achieved Shamatha. To go from this stage 9 to Shamatha, we have this radical transition in our body and mind. We have this physical and mental pliancy happening. And when we move from stage 9 to Shamatha, then now our body and mind become completely pliancy, flexible, serviceable. And it's said that when we achieve Shamatha, when we come out of that experience, our body feels light like cotton. And that's symbolized by the meditator flying through the sky. And then we also have mental pliancy, meaning now we can turn our mind to whatever we want without any resistance whatsoever. So that's the meditator on the elephant of the mind, can take it wherever he wants without any resistance. So that is Shamatha. And then we see one more diagram right at the top right. Meditator now has a sword in their hand. This is a sword of wisdom. This is a Vipassana practice. So now, since we have a very calm, clear, focused mind, now we can effectively go into Vipassana practice to investigate nature of reality, to cut through our ignorance and mental afflictions and suffering using the sword of wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness. And so now we have an effective way to move forward on the path. So that was very quickly, very briefly, the 9 stages. Any questions before we take a tea break? Anyone have any questions about anything we covered in that session?
Some of the slides mentioned that sometimes it's okay to contemplate the benefits of bodhicitta, precious human birth, and impermanence. So I'm wondering, what's your take on using these sort of analytical meditations as antidotes, especially to that?
So he saw that earlier we had a slide that talked about how to overcome laxity. Tsongkhapa was really recommending reflect on bodhicitta and reflect on precious human life to really uplift the mind, to really focus the mind in a good direction. So, and that's what we saw a little bit in the 6 prerequisites, is that if we really want to be effective, not only in this practice, but any practice, we need an integrated approach. You know, like if we want a healthy body, we need a healthy diet. We need to have the 3 major food groups, is it 3? I'm not a dietitian. I think I've heard somewhere there's 3 major food groups. We need to cover all 3. Otherwise, if we only do one, that's not good for the body. So similarly here, we need to cover all the major food groups in practice. And so here we're only focusing on one of them, the shamatha part, and we've seen a little bit in some of these slides today that even as a basis for that, we have to, you know, reflect on precious human life, death, and so forth. This in Buddhism is what's called preliminaries or foundation practices. So, and included in that is ethics, and also compassion, or not, well, actually, then we can take that separately. But these foundation practices are really what gives us a foundation for shamatha. Without that, again, probably you're going to be very lazy when it comes to doing shamatha, too busy, no time, and these sorts of things. And so this is really the foundation. And then on that basis, we engage in this shamatha practice. But then, and I said that shamatha is the basis of all other meditations, but does that mean we have to just do shamatha until we achieve some high level? Then we begin those other ones? No, because as you said, we need those others to help with the shamatha. So maybe, yes, we emphasize shamatha as a beginner because many of us in the modern world have very distracted minds, dull minds, chaotic minds, not very good attention skills. And unfortunately, studies show that each generation now in the modern world, the average attention skill is going like this, downhill. And one of the main culprits are these things and social media, because they're instant sort of click, 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 stimulus, click, 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 disaster for attention skills. So we really need to put some emphasis there. But then the 2 main wings of practice in all Buddhist traditions, and I think in all spiritual traditions, is wisdom and compassion. Vipassana and compassion. And so if we cover those 4 bases with an integrated approach, then yes, maybe initially, or foundations for sure. If we don't have that, we really need to work there. Then shamatha emphasis. But then if we're doing wisdom, compassion, then we have these antidotes that you mentioned, bodhicitta, and then the precious human life is foundation. So if we're doing those practices, then we will automatically have the antidotes there to avoid, in fact, prevent laxity from arising. If not, to overcome it if it does arise. So yes, integrated approach is going to be very helpful. And then Navita has got a question, I think, and then we'll take a tea break. Oh, we need to, yeah, you need to unmute. Wait on. I can do ask. I can unmute it. You've got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, the light just went out here.
Okay.
In the dark. I got a little confused when in stage 3 or 4 you were talking about, I think there's gross laxity and excitement, and you said like most of our attention could be on what we're doing for tonight, but like a little part is still on the breath.
That's medium
but I
excitation. That can still happen at stage 4.
Okay.
So
I
I'm not
thought
suggesting-
the laxity and all is more the quality of our attention, like the sharpness of it. Can you explain more?
Yeah, so laxity is sinking. And so that's the obstacle to clarity. We're trying to develop clarity of attention to see things clearly, and it's the sinking, it's the laxity that is preventing that. And whereas it's the excitation and distraction, which is preventing stability of attention, to be able to focus single-pointedly on the object. So even at stage 4, as we saw earlier, there's a lot of this fragmentation going on, where even at stage 4, we could be more focused on the distraction and just a little bit in the corner of the mind focusing on the object. So that is the stability of attention. But we can be very stable on the object. I mean, we could be 100% on the object, but not very clear. So that's the laxity part of it. So there's stability and clarity. There's distraction, and then the sharpness of attention. Does that make sense?
And could you explain the difference between gross and subtle levels of laxity and excitement?
Yeah. So that was in the slide before. So I mean, very coarse level of laxity would be extremely coarse. Most coarse would be falling asleep in meditation. A very heavy level of laxity would be where you're so drowsy, nothing's registering. You're completely spaced out. A less level would be that you notice sort of the breath there, but it's very vague. It's hardly noticeable. Less would be you notice the breath quite well, but it's not very clear. And the most subtle level of laxity is the breath is there, very clear, but your attention is not perfect there. And then in excitation, coarse excitation is when you're completely distracted from the object. Medium excitation is where you're getting pulled away and you're mainly focusing on something else, but a little bit in the corner of the mind, you're still holding the object. And a subtle excitation is where you're mainly on the object, but there's a bit of background static, a bit of background noise there that's pulling your attention a little bit. So these are the levels that we go through. Okay. Okay, it's 3 o'clock now, so let's take a break. So I think we've got a 30-minute break. Come back at 3:30 for the final session, and we'll look at, I want to look at the Shavasana posture, how to use that for meditation, and then also how to integrate, how to bring a lot of these ideas and this practice into daily life as well. So that's the next session. So half an hour tea break, come back at 3:30.